sources that we can trust. Now we move on to our next news. In Syria Sweida province, the government has begun evacuating Bedouin families after a week of bloody clashes between Druze civilians and Sunni Bedouin fighters. The violence, which erupted on July 13, has claimed hundreds of lives and risks derailing the country's fragile post-war stability. Video shows buses escorted by Red Crescent vehicles and ambulances as Bedouin families, some carrying belongings on trucks to free the area. Authorities have not released details on the terms of the evacuation or whether it is part of a wider hostage swap agreement which collapsed in talks this weekend. At Sweida's national hospitals, doctors say entire families have been killed. Dozens of bodies still lie outside awaiting identification. Let's listen in to Dr. Kaptul from Sweida.
تعاون مجازر عائلية، يعني عيلة مثل منية عم تاخذ بكرة أبيك، عم بتكون عيلة متلفة قبل منزل وربة منزل وأبنائهم عم بيروح عم بيموتوا كله، صح تموت عم بتضل جثث بأرضها، ما في ناس رنقت من كتر المشفى عطلة. في دكاترة قطع بتوصل كمان استشهد على الطريق، هدول سيارة دكتورة كاتب كمان استشهد على الطريق، هدول كلهم عم بيموتوا ليجوا يصفوا إنسان بغض النظر لا عارفين على التيم ولا عارفين على الكل ولا عارفين الموت. في حالات وصلت على المشفى كون الإسعاف قتلوا المسعف واللي عم ينسعف، قتلوه من برا بس تبوه من الخيط الخلاف. نحن منا بس نتعامل بموضوع إنسان.
Now we go back to our discussion with Kobe Michael. He's a senior researcher at the INSS and Miskav Institute. Thank you, Kobe, for staying with us. Professor, what role should the Syrian government and international organizations play in ensuring the protection and rights of displaced communities, such as the evacuated families in Sweida region?
The situation there in South Syria, in the Druze mountain or the town of Sweida, is very complicated and goes back to the roots of Syria pre-El Jolani. I mean, Syria during Assad regime, the father and the son. There are disputes between the Druze and the Bedouin tribes there, which are Sunnis. And the Druze were part of the Assad regime because according to their belief, their religion belief, they have to be totally loyal to the government and to the state or the country that they live in. They don't have a country of their own, and their religion bans actually an independent Druze country. So once Assad regime collapsed, the Sunnis there in the region came in order to revenge and began slaughtering and massacring the Druze there, and we found ourselves in a very chaotic situation and a very problematic situation. The problem is that we still do not know for sure if El Jolani himself, who used to be a jihadist, okay, he is part of this plan. If he is militias actually organized this massacre of the Druze together with the Bedouins, and if this is the situation, then we are in a very severe problem. If it is not the situation, it means that El Jolani doesn't control effectively his militias. In both cases, or for both interpretations, we are in a problem. So what Israel tries to do now is actually to protect the Druze on the one hand by deterring the Bedouins on the one hand and the Syrian regime on the other hand, and to reach to some understandings with the Syrian regime with regard to ceasefire in this area. I hope that it will be a stable ceasefire, although I think that there are some very good reasons for the people who live in this area to continue fighting between of them, and I hope that we will not see too many casualties.
And Kobe, how might renewed sectarian violence between Druze and Sunni groups affect Syria's long-term prospects?
Um, First of all, this is a destabilizing effect. First of all, for Syria itself. Secondly, for Israel, because the Druze or the Druze mountain and the Sweida area are part of what Israel considers as a buffer zone, which means that this is an area that should be controlled and with no military presence. And the idea of the buffer zone is the idea of preventing the jihadi militias from reorganizing themselves and attacking Israel from these areas. The Druze in this regard are part of the Israeli interest because they assure in this way or another, or they prevent in this way or another from the Sunni militias, the Sunni jihadists there to reorganize themselves. So Israel has to act there, and Israel has to assure that this area will remain as a security buffer zone, and therefore Israel attacks any convoys of Sunni militias that try to reach to the area, in order to prevent, first of all, any casualties and massacres to the Druze community, and secondly, to prevent any presence of armed forces in this area. Israel tries to reach to understandings with the Syrian regime with regard to the conducting or the managing of this security buffer zone. We have succeeded in reaching to some understandings with the Syrian regime. Unfortunately, these understandings were violated or breached by the Syrian regime when it enabled these militias to reach to this area, and we saw what we saw in July 13.
Thank you very much, Professor Colby Michael, for joining us today and sharing your insight.